I wasn't invited to my mom's retirement gala, and I still don't know why. My name is Claire Hammond. I'm 35 years old, and last Saturday, I found myself standing outside the Denver Marriott in a dress I hadn't worn since my cousin's wedding, palms sweating, heart pounding, holding a carefully wrapped gift that suddenly felt ridiculous in my hands. Across from me stood a security guard, arms crossed, and beside him, my father, calm, cold, unmoved. "She's not allowed in," he said. And just like that, I became the uninvited guest. It would have made sense if we were estranged, if years of distance or unresolved arguments had built a wall between us, but we weren't, or at least I didn't think we were. I called, I texted, I visited. Not often, but enough. I wasn't perfect, but I was present. Now I was frozen outside the retirement party of my own mother. She'd worked her entire life, 30 years at the same company, growing it from a tiny HR team to a full-blown department that ran like a machine. Tonight was her night, a catered celebration with speeches and laughter and coworkers patting her on the back, a slideshow looping decades of memories. My sister Melissa was inside, my brother Aaron too. I'd seen their cars in the lot, but I wasn't on the list. To understand how I got here, you need to know what it was like growing up as me and our family. Picture a suburban street in Denver. Safe, sunny, the kind of neighborhood where kids rollerbladed until dusk, and moms compared lunchbox notes. I was the firstborn, the test run. Melissa came 2 years later, all smiles and ballet recitals and a knack for people. She knew how to read a room before she could spell kindergarten. Aaron was the baby, sweet, low maintenance, and brilliant. The kind of kid who could forget to study and still ace the exam. Then there was me. I liked math. I liked machines. I liked solving problems that didn't involve small talk or smiles. I was intense, I've been told. Too serious. Too much. I skipped prom to finish my robot build for nationals. I left for MIT at 18 and didn't look back. At least, not right away. I chased what I loved. Engineering, AI, startups. I made mistakes, took risks, burned out, came back, reinvented myself, and kept building. But I always called home, and I always sent presents. Holidays, birthdays, even for the new dog Melissa got that one time and swore was Mom's favorite grandchild. I knew I wasn't the easiest daughter, but I loved them. So when I heard Mom was retiring, I booked my flight. I even bought her a gift I thought she'd love, a personalized photo frame etched with the words, "Thank you for building something that lasts." It had a picture of us from when I was 9, sitting on the garage floor, soldering wires to my first homemade lamp. I remembered that day so clearly. She'd sat with me for hours, letting me explain every part, even though she didn't understand a word of it. That was us, I thought. Back at the hotel, I tried again. "There has to be some mistake," I said, my voice cracking just enough to betray me. "I'm her daughter." My father didn't flinch. "Claire, don't make a scene." A scene? After everything? After flying across the country, wrapping this stupid gift with care, showing up early, even curling my hair? I felt like a stranger at my own family's doorstep. "I just want to see her. Give her this." "She doesn't want that," he said. It was the calm in his voice that got me. Not anger, not disappointment. Just decision. Like this had been discussed, agreed upon, finalized. Like they'd all moved on without telling me. I sat in the rental car for what felt like an hour. Every part of me wanted to storm in, grab the mic mid-toast and say something dramatic like, "Hi, remember me? The daughter you forgot?" But I didn't. That's not who I am anymore. Instead, I watched from the tinted window as Melissa hugged old co-workers and Aaron clinked glasses with someone from accounting. My mother was radiant. She looked lighter than I'd seen her in years, like someone who'd finally exhaled after holding her breath for too long. It should have been her night. It was her night. But still, I had questions, and hurt, and silence. When the party ended, I waited until the crowd thinned. I walked back in through the now empty lobby and left the gift with the front desk. "Please give this to Margaret Hammond," I said. The clerk smiled. "Sure thing. Are you family?" I paused. My throat closed up. I was. It's been 5 days. No one's called. I don't know if she got the gift. I don't know if she even wanted it. All I know is this: being the difficult one doesn't mean you stop loving. It doesn't mean you stop hoping. It just means your love looks different. It's quieter, more stubborn, less easy to understand. I've spent most of my life solving problems, equations, algorithms, systems. But nothing has prepared me for this one, trying to understand when and why I stopped being welcome in my own story. Maybe one day I'll get answers, maybe not. But next time I'll knock louder. I built a multi-million-dollar company. But my family still treated me like a failure. I didn't stumble into success. I dragged myself toward it, scraped, clawed, and bled for every inch of credibility in rooms full of men who didn't think someone like me belonged there. They called me too intense, too blunt, too ambitious, and that was just on the better days. But I kept showing up, meeting after meeting, pitch after pitch, brushing off condescension like lint, and eventually it paid off. I built Neurosci, a company no one believed in at first. A startup born from sleepless nights, endless iterations, and the unwavering belief that adaptive AI could actually change lives in healthcare, not just make things faster, but smarter. Today, it's a multi-million-dollar firm. We've partnered with hospitals, licensed our tech globally, and our software has helped doctors make critical decisions with greater accuracy than ever before. I've been featured in Forbes, interviewed on Bloomberg, spoken at MIT, and every time someone calls me a pioneer, I still feel a jolt of disbelief. Like maybe I really made it. But in my family's eyes, you'd think I sold knockoff purses out of a van. Every holiday was the same slow-motion car crash. I'd fly in from wherever I was, Boston, D.C., sometimes Singapore, and land straight into the soft hum of Midwestern politeness. No one asked about the company. No one wanted to hear about the breakthroughs or the research grants. Instead, I got those faint smiles, the weirdly formal, "Oh, Claire, that's nice," as if I'd told them I won a coupon for free dry cleaning. My mother once pulled me aside during Thanksgiving, between Melissa's baked brie and Aaron's usual monologue about crypto, to say, "I just worry you're working too hard, honey. Maybe slow down, settle down." Settle down. Like ambition was a phase. Like everything I'd built could be traded in for a mortgage and a golden retriever. Meanwhile, Melissa brought her Costco cheese platter for the 4th year in a row, placed it on the kitchen island like it was the second coming, and everyone fawned over her. "She's just always there," they said, like it was a badge of honor. Never mind that she lived 10 minutes away and worked for the family business where Mom could micromanage her schedule like a chessboard. Don't get me wrong, Melissa's not evil. She's just safe, predictable, palatable, and in our family, that made her the favorite. I remember one Christmas, I tried to explain a new feature we were rolling out, AI-driven diagnostics that reduced ER wait times by streamlining triage decisions. Real innovation. Life-saving impact. Aaron looked up from his phone long enough to say, "That sounds complicated," and went back to whatever Reddit hole he was in. Mom blinked. "You really should take a vacation." Dad changed the subject to Melissa's new throw pillows. I sat there, holding a glass of wine I didn't even want, thinking, what would I have to do to be seen here? Really seen? Climb Everest? Solve climate change? Bake a damn casserole? After a while, I stopped trying. Not out of bitterness, but survival. I learned how to smile through it, how to nod when someone mispronounced my company name or asked if I was still doing that tech thing. But inside, it chipped away at me. Not because I needed applause, I get plenty of that elsewhere, but because your family is supposed to be where you don't have to prove anything, where you're allowed to be big, bold, brilliant, and still be loved like anyone else in the room. Instead, I felt like a visitor, a guest with impressive stories no one wanted to hear. I think the real heartbreak came not from what they said, but from what they didn't. When we hit our Series C funding, no one called. When I won that industry award in Berlin, no one sent a text. But when Melissa hosted brunch for the neighbor who broke her ankle, there were flowers, a group card, homemade soup. They celebrated presence over progress, familiarity over success. I tried to understand. Maybe I made them uncomfortable. Maybe my life felt foreign. Or maybe they just preferred the version of me that left quietly and didn't take up too much space. So when I found myself outside that hotel, uninvited to my mother's retirement gala, I shouldn't have been surprised. But I was. Because even after all the years of being tolerated rather than embraced, part of me still thought, surely they'll make room for me tonight. Surely after all I've done, after all I've become, they'd want me there. But they didn't, and that was the night it hit me. I had built a world where I was finally respected by investors, by colleagues, by the media, but not by the people who helped shape me, not by the ones who were supposed to matter most. I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I'm telling it because someone out there is sitting in a similar chair at a similar table, wondering why their wins feel so hollow when shared with the wrong people. I want you to know it's not your fault. Sometimes the rooms we're born into are too small for who we become. And sometimes the love we crave has conditions we can't meet without shrinking. But here's what I've learned. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to explain your worth in a language they refuse to understand. You can love them. You can forgive them. But you do not have to stay small for them. After the gala, I saw the photos online. There she was, my mother, radiant in navy satin, holding a crystal plaque and smiling like a woman finally being seen for everything she's given. The backdrop said, 30 years of excellence. She deserved it. But what stopped me cold weren't the flower arrangements or the speeches or even the hotel ballroom dripping in gold accents. It was who was there and who wasn't. My cousins, our old next-door neighbors, Melissa's college roommates, even Dad's retired golf buddies. People who hadn't spoken to my mother in years had shown up with corsages and cards. And me? Not a single mention. Not in the posts, not in the captions, not even a vague, "Wish you could have been here." I didn't exist. Not in that world. Not in that celebration. Not in that family. It wasn't just exclusion. It was erasure. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. At one point, I zoomed in on a group shot like some amateur detective, half expecting to find a clue. A whisper of acknowledgement that maybe they hadn't meant to leave me out, that maybe this was all some logistical mistake. But there it was, clear as crystal. They'd made room for everyone but me. I called Mom the next day. She picked up after the fourth ring, her voice thinner than usual, like she was balancing a tray of invisible excuses. "Claire, hi honey?" I skipped the pleasantries. I saw the photos. A pause. "Oh, it was nice, a little overwhelming." "Looks like a big crowd," I said, keeping my tone steady. "You must have been surrounded." Another pause. Then the nail in the coffin. "Melissa said you were traveling in Europe again?" Europe? I hadn't left the US in 8 months. I was in Boston, working on a pilot program for AI-assisted cancer screenings. My location wasn't exactly a secret. I'd posted about it, emailed. I'd even texted her a photo from the hospital's rooftop garden last week. That's when it clicked. It wasn't just that I hadn't been invited. Someone had rewritten my story. Someone had been curating a version of me. One that was conveniently absent, conveniently unreachable, conveniently dismissible. And who better to do that than the golden child herself? Melissa. Reliable Melissa. Sweet Melissa. Always there with a cheese platter Melissa, and apparently now spokesperson for my whereabouts. She hadn't just excluded me, she'd explained me away, pushed me out of the narrative with a tidy little lie that no one bothered to fact-check. After all, why would they question her? She was the one who showed up. I was just the ghost. I booked the flight before I even finished packing, tossed a few outfits in a carry-on, barely remembered to zip up my laptop. I didn't tell anyone I was coming, not even Mom. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about drama. It was about truth. Because whatever cracks had split between me and my family, I still owed the woman who once sat under a blanket fort reading Maya Angelou to me by flashlight the dignity of showing up. So I did. At Tattered Cover Bookstore, Mom's favorite sanctuary for years, I found a rare, signed hardcover of Mary Oliver's Devotions. She used to read it on Sunday mornings, curled up with coffee and a blanket she crocheted during snowstorms. I remembered how she'd pause between poems, letting the silence stretch like ribbon, letting the words settle deep. I had it gift-wrapped, a simple ribbon, no card, just the book and everything it stood for. That evening, I stood outside the house I grew up in. Porch lights warm, shadows of familiar silhouettes moving behind the curtains. It smelled like pine mulch and old comfort. My heart beat harder than it had before investor meetings. This wasn't just showing up to a gala. This was walking back into a room where I'd been silently voted off the island. I knocked. Dad answered. For a moment, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe in a way, he had. "Claire," he said, slow and deliberate. "Hi, Dad." I smiled, tight. "Is she home?" He didn't move, just studied me like I was something fragile on the edge of a shelf. Then finally, he stepped aside. "She's in the kitchen." I walked in, heels echoing against hardwood floors that hadn't changed since high school. There was the framed photo of us at my MIT graduation, facing slightly away from the hallway now, a subtle, almost poetic misalignment, and there she was, my mother, still in her robe, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, standing in front of the sink. She turned when she heard me. Her eyes widened. "Claire?" "I wanted to say congratulations, in person." I held out the wrapped book. 30 years of teaching? That deserves more than a Facebook post. She looked at the gift like it might explode. Slowly, she took it from my hands. Her fingers brushed mine, and something softened in her face. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You didn't have to come." "I know." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, loaded. Finally, I said it. "I wasn't in Europe, Mom. I was in Boston, working, waiting for an invitation that never came." Her face shifted, confusion, then guilt, then something else I couldn't name. I thought you didn't want to come." Melissa said, "Yeah." She said I was too busy, traveling, not interested. She made it easy to forget I existed. "I didn't know," she said. "I swear to you, I didn't know." I believed her. And that was almost worse, because what kind of bond had we really had if it could be erased that easily? We talked for an hour. Not everything was resolved. Not everything was forgiven. But something cracked open between us. I told her about neurosci, about the hospital project, about the nights I couldn't sleep wondering if I was too much for this family, or if this family was too small for me. She didn't have answers, but she listened, and for the first time in years, that was enough. Before I left, she hugged me, long and tight and silent, the way you hug someone when you don't have the words yet, but you're trying, and maybe that's all we ever needed. Not perfection, just a willingness to show up. I should have known the moment I saw him standing there, arms crossed like a security guard. My father, always calm, always controlled, blocking the entrance like he owned the building. "You weren't invited," he said. His voice was low, flat, not angry, just final. I felt the sharp heat rise in my chest, the kind that comes from being denied something you shouldn't have to earn. "I talked to Mom," I said, voice shaking, more with disbelief than emotion. "She told me to come." "She was being polite," he replied without missing a beat. "This is for people who've been present in her life." I froze. That word, present, not successful, not loyal, not loving, just present. I wanted to laugh, scream, and cry all at once. The irony was unbearable after years of working to change lives, build something meaningful, and still somehow falling short in the only place that was supposed to know me without credentials. I turned, ready to leave. Not because I wanted to, but because the weight of all of it, the rejection, the dismissal, the sheer audacity, was too much. Then I felt it. A light tap on my shoulder. "Claire Hammond?" I turned. A man stood there, mid-30s, tall, clean-cut, dark suit. Handsome in that put-together way people in holiday cards always look. He had the kind of familiar face that made you pause. "I'm Eli," he said, "Melissa's fiancé." Ah, that's why. I'd seen him in photos, never met him in person. Melissa never bothered with introductions, just like she never bothered telling me they were engaged until 3 months after the proposal. "You're the founder of NeuroSync?" "Neurosci," I corrected, out of reflex. "Yes." He blinked, surprised. "Wait, that's you?" I nodded, still confused. "I'm a neurologist," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "I've been following your work for 2 years. Your early model for adaptive cognitive AI. It changed our entire patient evaluation process. I used it in my fellowship. It was groundbreaking." I felt my jaw tense. Gratitude? Surprise? I wasn't sure what to feel. This man, a stranger, knew more about what I did than my own family ever cared to. "I didn't know you were Melissa's sister," he added, frowning slightly. "Why didn't she tell me?" I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. How could I answer? How do you explain being edited out of your own story by someone who was supposed to share it? And then, before I could stop him, he turned toward the crowd, toward the cluster of elegantly dressed guests sipping white wine and murmuring politely over cheese plates. He raised his voice just enough, not yelling, but clear, commanding. "Excuse me." Heads turned, forks froze mid-air. "This woman," he said, gesturing toward me, "is Claire Hammond, founder of NeuroSci and one of the most innovative figures in adaptive cognitive care. Her work is revolutionizing how we treat patients with degenerative neurological conditions." There was a ripple of whispers. "She's also Margaret Hammond's daughter," he continued, "and apparently she's being blocked from her own mother's celebration." Silence. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, everyone looked at me, and not like I was an interruption or a burden or a forgotten afterthought. They looked like they were seeing me. I watched my father's jaw tighten. I saw Melissa standing a few feet away with a glass of wine, frozen in place like someone had yanked the plug on her stage lighting. But I didn't move, not yet. That moment didn't fix everything. It didn't magically mend years of strained dinners and quiet judgments. But something shifted. The unspoken rules cracked. People came up to me, tentatively, awkwardly, but genuinely. A former colleague of Mom's said, "I've read about your company. My sister has Parkinson's. Your work gave us hope." Another offered a shy, "I didn't know you were related. Your mom never mentioned your field." And just like that, the invisible wall started crumbling. Not completely, but enough. Later, when the music returned and the room began to breathe again, Mom found me near the balcony. She looked tired. Beautiful, but tired. I couldn't read her expression. Equal parts regret and calculation, like she was trying to rewrite the scene in real time. "I didn't expect you," she said. "Yes, you did," I replied softly. "You just didn't fight for it." Her eyes welled. She looked away. "I wanted you here," she whispered, "but not enough to stop them from pretending I wasn't part of this." I didn't know what to say, Claire. Your father, Melissa. Things got complicated. "No," I said, more gently than I thought I could. "They got convenient." She reached out, touching my arm. "I'm proud of you," she said, "even if I don't say it enough." "You don't say it at all," I said. Not cruel, just honest. We stood there for a long moment, the city glowing behind us. And then, quietly, I handed her the wrapped book. Mary Oliver. Devotions. She held it in her hands like it might break. "I remembered," I said. "The blanket fort, the flashlight. You used to cry at the line about your one wild and precious life." Tears broke loose. She nodded, eyes glassy. "I still do," she said. I didn't stay long after that. There was no grand reconciliation, no family group hug. Melissa avoided me the rest of the evening. My father nodded stiffly when I left. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was this. I came. I stood my ground. I let myself be seen. Not for approval, not for applause. But because I'm done shrinking. Some people will never celebrate you no matter how brightly you shine. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show up anyway, fully, unapologetically, not to beg for a seat at the table, but to remind yourself that you built your own. And sometimes, just sometimes, someone in the crowd will stand up and say what no one else would. And that can change everything. My sister tried to erase me from the family. Then her fiancé found out the truth. Melissa stormed toward us like she'd just heard someone insult her entire bloodline. Her heels clicked like a warning. Her face? Pure panic wrapped in pearls and blush. "Eli," she hissed, "can we please talk privately?" But it was too late. The words had already been said. The crowd had already turned. And the silence? It was deafening. The kind that feels thick and electric, like the moment right before lightning strikes. Then Mom appeared. She must have heard the commotion, her hair still perfectly pinned, her lipstick slightly faded from the glass of champagne in her hand. But her face, that cracked. "Claire," she said, confused, "why are you standing outside?" "She wasn't on the guest list," my father replied without even flinching. He said it like a fact, like reading a line off a grocery receipt. Mom turned to him, her voice slicing through the space between them. "Why not?" Melissa froze. Her face went pale, like all the blood that gave her that practiced social smile just drained out of her all at once. I thought she was too busy," she stammered. "She missed Thanksgiving and—" "Because I was presenting at the Mayo Clinic." I snapped, the words sharp and clear. "And I invited all of you. You never answered." I could feel the eyes on us, dozens of guests, unsure if they should pretend not to notice or lean in for more. And then it started unraveling, not slowly, not subtly, but violently, like a thread yanked from the hem of a dress until the whole thing collapsed. Turns out, Melissa hadn't just assumed I was unavailable. She had made me unavailable. She intercepted emails, filtered texts, responded to messages sent to Mom under the guise of helping manage her calendar. She didn't just forget to include me, she made sure I wasn't included, systematically, deliberately, silently, and no one noticed, not even Mom, because Melissa had spent years convincing everyone that she was the safe one, the dependable one, the daughter who always showed up while I was off somewhere too busy, too intense, too far away. But the real twist? Eli had applied for a research grant through Neurosci 6 months ago, and I, the black sheep, the overlooked one, was the person who approved his proposal, not knowing who he was, not caring, just recognizing a project with merit and giving it the green light. "You already said yes to me once," Eli said, turning toward me, voice low and steady. "Let me return the favor." He extended his arm. My mother, without hesitation, took my other hand, and just like that, we walked inside together. The room didn't know what to do with us. Eyes followed us like spotlights, curiosity flickering across every face. It wasn't a scandal yet, but it was damn close. Eli and I walked ahead, shoulder to shoulder, my mom beside me, clinging to my hand as if she was anchoring herself in the one place that hadn't been manipulated. Behind us, Melissa stood frozen in the threshold, caught in a spotlight of her own making. We didn't speak as we entered the heart of the rooftop event. The Denver skyline stretched out behind the stage, glittering like it had been built just for tonight. Someone was giving a toast before we arrived, an HR director, I think, but they stopped mid-sentence when we stepped in. Whether out of politeness or shock, I'll never know. But no one moved to stop us. No one asked us to leave, because deep down, I think they knew, or at least sensed, that something important had just happened. Something real. We found an empty table near the back. My mom sat beside me, still holding the poetry book I'd given her earlier. She hadn't let go of it since I arrived. Her thumb traced the edge of the cover like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "I didn't know," she said again, this time softer. "Claire, I swear to you, I didn't know she was doing that. I believe you," I said, and I meant it. But that didn't erase the years I spent wondering why my messages went unanswered. Why I always felt like I was speaking into a void while everyone else heard each other loud and clear. I glanced across the room. Melissa stood near the entrance, talking to Dad. Her arms were folded tight across her chest. Her expression twisted in confusion, like she couldn't understand how this had all slipped out of her control. She'd built a version of our family that didn't include me, and now the scaffolding was collapsing. I don't think she ever expected Eli to stand up for me, or to even know who I was beyond the carefully edited version she told him about. That was her miscalculation. She underestimated who I'd become when I wasn't shrinking to fit her narrative. Later that night, Eli found me alone near the terrace railing. The party had returned to its rhythm. Light jazz, polite laughter, the clinking of glasses. But something fundamental had shifted. You could feel it in the air. "Can I say something?" he asked. I nodded. "You're nothing like what I was told." I smiled, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. "Let me guess. Emotionally distant, cold, too career-focused." He looked embarrassed. "Something like that." "Sounds about right," I said. "That's the version of me Melissa prefers. Easier to compete with someone who's not really in the room." "I'm sorry," he said, and I could tell he meant it. "If I had known—" "You weren't supposed to know," I said. "That was the whole plan." He studied me for a long moment. "You've done incredible things. Your work, what you built, it's not just impressive, it's important." That struck deeper than I expected. "Thank you," I said. And for once, it didn't feel like I was stealing validation from someone else's plate. It was offered freely. When I left the venue that night, I didn't wait for another confrontation. Melissa never approached me. Dad never looked my way again. I could live with that. Mom hugged me at the door, not the half-hearted polite kind, the real kind. The kind I hadn't felt since I was 17 and boarding a plane to MIT with nothing but a duffel bag and a scholarship letter in my pocket. "Don't disappear again," she whispered. "I won't," I said, "but I need you to see me, the real me, not the version she tells you about." She nodded, and I think, finally, she understood. The next morning, I checked my inbox. An email from Eli sat at the top. Subject line: "One wild and precious life." Inside was a short note: "Thank you for letting me see you, and thank you, again, for saying yes. I hope we talk more, not just about grants." I smiled. For the first time in years, I felt something click back into place. Not just with my family, but with myself. I'd spent so long building, climbing, striving, only to return home and be told I was still the problem, still too much, still not enough. But the truth is, I was never the problem. I was just never what they expected. And now, I've stopped trying to be. That night didn't fix everything. It wasn't some Hollywood ending where years of resentment dissolve in a single hug, where music swells and everyone cries and says the right things. Number Melissa left early. Her eyes were red and her stride was sharp, fast, like she was trying to outrun the moment. She didn't say goodbye, didn't look at me, just disappeared into the Denver night with her fiancé quietly trailing behind her, caught in the wreckage of a truth she couldn't control. My father? He didn't say a word, not a glance, not a nod, just stood in a corner with his drink and his silence, choosing loyalty to the version of the family that made more sense to him, predictable, polished, peaceful, even if it was built on omission. But my mother, she stayed, long after the music faded and the lights dimmed, long after the guests filtered out, buzzing about the drama, pretending not to gossip. She sat next to me at that rooftop table, the Mary Oliver book still in her hands like an anchor. She ran her fingers along the edges like it might slip away if she let go. Then she looked at me, really looked at me. And for the first time in what felt like decades, I saw her again. The woman who once read poetry to me in the middle of thunderstorms. The one who taught me to value words, to ask questions, to be curious, even when it made me too much for everyone else. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking like old glass. "I didn't question more. I trusted the wrong person." There it was, not an excuse, not a deflection, just truth. Clean, honest, human. I didn't speak right away. I let the silence stretch, let her sit in it, because that was part of the healing too, owning the damage. But then I leaned in and whispered, "Now you know." And then softer, "Let's start again." That sentence, it wasn't just for her, it was for me. Because I had to believe we could start again, that it wasn't too late, that even if we couldn't rebuild everything, we could build something new. From scratch, from honesty. We sat there for a long time. No performance, no forced smiles, just two women trying to find their way back to each other through the wreckage. She asked me about my work, not out of obligation, but interest. Real questions, real listening. I told her about the latest project, an early intervention AI that could detect Alzheimer's 10 years earlier than standard models. She got quiet, her thumb still on the edge of a poem. "My grandmother had Alzheimer's," she said. I nodded. "I know, that's why I started there." She blinked like she was remembering me all over again, and maybe she was. Eventually, we stood up. The staff was folding tablecloths. The DJ was packing up cords. The skyline glowed behind us, Denver humming in the background like a tired lullaby. She hugged me. Long, tight, the kind of hug you only give when you realize what you almost lost. As she pulled back, she looked at me and said, "This isn't the end of the conversation." "I hope not," I said. "Call me tomorrow?" "I will." And I meant it. Not out of duty, out of want. I walked back to my hotel alone, heels in one hand, wind tangling my hair. The city buzzed quietly beneath me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the beginning of it. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Family isn't just blood. It's choice. It's action. It's what happens when people finally see each other clearly and still decide to stay. That night didn't fix everything, but it started something real, and sometimes that's even better. 3 months later, everything looked the same, and nothing was. Melissa and Eli broke off their engagement. No big announcement. No family drama, at least not that I heard. Just a quiet removal of names from shared calendars and social bios. A clean break that left behind a silence no one rushed to fill. I don't know the details. I didn't ask. But I imagine the fallout wasn't about just one night. It was about all the little truths she had tried to bury finally bubbling to the surface. You can only edit the story for so long before someone flips the page and finds the truth. And my mother? She visited Boston for the first time in 17 years. She stood in my apartment, eyes sweeping across the clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, her mouth slightly open like she was trying to reconcile this version of me, the real me, with whatever image she'd been clinging to all this time. "It's beautiful," she said, gently setting her purse down on the counter. "You thought I lived in a lab, didn't you?" I teased. She laughed, reluctantly but sincerely. "Maybe a little." We spent the weekend walking along the Charles River. She came to the neurosci office and met my team. She even sat in on a small internal demo where one of our lead developers showed how we were training the AI to identify early micropatterns in speech deterioration. She cried. Right there, in the middle of the boardroom, in front of 3 engineers and 2 interns. And then she hugged me, tight, fierce, and whispered, "I had no idea." "I know," I said, "but now you do." Eli and I kept in touch, not romantically, not emotionally charged, just mutual respect, quiet check-ins, the occasional forwarded article with a "thought you'd like this" attached. 6 weeks after the rooftop night, his hospital submitted a proposal. 3 weeks after that, we launched a pilot partnership. Adaptive cognitive care for early-stage Alzheimer's patients. Data integration directly into their neurobehavioral unit. One of the interns at NeuroSci wrote a line of code that reduced data retrieval time by 40%. It's the kind of work that outlives you. That echoes long after you've left the room. That's the life I've built, and now it's being seen. And Melissa? She finally messaged me. Just a text, no apology, no explanation, just this. "You always got to leave." I stayed, and somehow you still got ahead. I stared at it for a long time. There was pain in it, maybe resentment, maybe grief. But mostly, I heard exhaustion, the kind that comes from holding up a mask for too long and realizing no one's clapping anymore. I didn't reply right away. I wanted to get it right, not out of pettiness, but clarity. This wasn't about winning. It never was. It was about truth. So I wrote back. I didn't leave to get ahead. I left to become myself. She didn't answer, but I saw that she read it, and that was enough. Here's what I've learned. Some people will never understand your choices, especially when those choices involve leaving the version of yourself they preferred, the quieter version, the agreeable version, the one who never asked for space, recognition, or truth. But you don't owe anyone a smaller version of yourself just to make them comfortable. Leaving doesn't mean abandoning. It means choosing growth, choosing honesty, choosing yourself. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, not out of anger, but out of love. Love for the person you're becoming. My family isn't perfect. It never was. It never will be. But now, at least, the air is clear. The shadows are named, and I no longer feel like I'm shouting from the edge of a cliff, begging to be heard. Now, I speak, and the right people listen. That's all I ever wanted, not to be the favorite, just to be seen.